The Galactic Council chamber hummed with nervous energy as representatives from 1,000 worlds gathered for the emergency session. Ambassador Zektar of the Alterian Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes, his 4 eyes scanning the vast amphitheater filled with beings of every conceivable form. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension, a palpable fear that had been growing across the galaxy for the past solar cycle. At the center of the chamber, the ancient keeper of records stood motionless, her crystalline form refracting the light from 100 suns. She had called this meeting, breaking 10,000 years of silence. When she spoke, her voice resonated through every translator, every neural link, every consciousness present. "The signs have begun," she intoned, and a collective shudder ran through the assembly. "The ancient warnings left by the first ones are manifesting. The one who would return stirs in the void." Zektar felt his secondary hearts skip a beat. Every civilization had legends of the One, the destroyer of empires, the ender of golden ages. Some called it a force of nature, others a vengeful god. But all agreed on one thing. When the One returned, the galaxy would burn. "What evidence do you present, Keeper?" asked the synthetic consciousness of the Mechanist Collective, its voice a chorus of 1,000,000 networked minds. The Keeper's form pulsed with ancient light. "The void sensors at the galaxy's edge have detected gravitational anomalies consistent with the prophecies. Stars in the outer rim have begun to dim without cause. And most disturbing of all, the beacon of warning, silent for 50,000 years, has begun to transmit again." The chamber erupted in voices, clicks, whistles, and other forms of communication. The beacon of warning was a relic from before recorded history, a massive structure that the first ones had built as their final act before vanishing. Its message was simple and terrifying. When this signal ends, the One returns. Admiral Keth of the warrior caste stood, her scales rippling with controlled aggression. "We must prepare our fleets. If this One is a physical threat, we will meet it with force. The combined might of the Galactic Council has never been defeated." "Fool," hissed the representative from the Void Dancers, beings who lived in the space between stars. "You cannot fight what you do not understand. The first ones were more advanced than any of us, and they could only flee." As the debate raged, Zektar noticed something peculiar. In the far corner of the chamber sat a figure he had never seen before. Humanoid, wearing a simple gray uniform devoid of markings. The being watched the proceedings with an expression Zektar couldn't quite read. There was something unsettling about its stillness, its calm amid the panic. The discussions continued for hours. Military strategists proposed defensive positions. Scientists suggested research into the first one's technology. Mystics spoke of ancient rituals that might appease the One. But through it all, that lone figure remained silent, observing. Finally, the Keeper raised her hand for silence. "There is one more matter. Our deep space archaeologists have made a discovery in the Dead Zone, the region of space all races instinctively avoid. They found a derelict vessel of unknown origin, containing data crystals with partial records from the time of the first ones. The holographic projectors activated, displaying images of the vessel. It was unlike anything in known space, organic curves merged with impossible angles, materials that seemed to shift between states of matter. But it was the symbol on its hull that made Zektar's blood run cold, a sphere of blue and green, wreathed in white clouds. "This symbol appears throughout the records," the Keeper continued. "Always in connection with something the first ones called the birth world, or the origin. Our linguists believe it may be connected to the One." The gray uniformed figure shifted slightly, the first movement it had made in hours. Zektar found himself drawn to study this stranger more closely. The being's features were simple: 2 eyes, 1 nose, a mouth. Bipedal with 5-digit hands, unremarkable by galactic standards, yet something about it nagged at him. "We must decipher these records," declared the prime mind of the logic worlds. "Knowledge is our only weapon against the unknown." The council agreed to form research teams, battle groups, and exploration missions. Resources from across the galaxy would be pooled in the face of this existential threat. As the session concluded and representatives began to disperse, Zektar approached the mysterious figure. "I don't recognize your species or affiliation," he said carefully. "May I ask whom you represent?" The being looked at him with those strange, forward-facing eyes. When it spoke, its voice was soft, but carried an odd weight. "I represent those who remember, Ambassador. Those who have been waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For the truth to surface, for old debts to be settled, for the children to come home." Before Zektar could ask more, the figure turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowds. He stood there, puzzled and oddly disturbed. Children? What children? And why did those simple words fill him with such dread? In the weeks that followed, the galaxy mobilized like never before. Fleets gathered at strategic points. Scientists worked around the clock to decode the ancient records. The beacon of warning continued its countdown, each pulse marking another step toward the unknown catastrophe. Zektar found himself assigned to the archaeological team studying the derelict vessel. As they worked, more pieces of the puzzle emerged. References to a species that had seeded the stars, images of beings that looked remarkably like the stranger from the council chamber, and most puzzling, repeated mentions of a world that had been lost or forgotten. The breakthrough came from an unlikely source. A junior technician running a new translation algorithm discovered that the symbol on the vessel wasn't just decorative, it was a map. The blue and green sphere represented a planet, and the swirls around it showed stellar positions from 50,000 years ago. "If we account for stellar drift," the technician explained excitedly, "we can triangulate the location of this world." The team worked feverishly, calculating and recalculating. When the results came in, Zektar stared at them in confusion. The coordinates pointed to empty space in a sparse region of the galaxy's spiral arm. There was nothing there, no star, no planet, just void. Or was there? As they refined their scans, they detected something odd. The space wasn't truly empty. There were gravitational echoes, remnants of mass that should be there but wasn't, as if something had been removed or hidden. The discovery sent shockwaves through the research community. What could hide an entire star system? The technology required was beyond anything they could imagine, unless... "What if the one isn't coming from outside the galaxy?" proposed Dr. Yelen, the team's lead physicist. "What if it's been here all along, hidden, waiting?" The implications were staggering. If true, it meant the one possessed technology that made the entire Galactic Council look primitive by comparison. It could be anywhere, watching, preparing. Reports began flooding in from across the galaxy. Ships were disappearing near the dead zone. Automated probes sent to investigate the gravitational anomalies never returned. And most disturbing, several races reported the same phenomenon, citizens claiming to have dreams of a blue world calling to them, drawing them toward the empty coordinates. The warrior caste mobilized their greatest fleet to investigate, led by Admiral Keth herself. 12,000 vessels, the pride of 100 worlds, jumped to the edge of the anomaly. What they found there defied explanation. Space itself seemed wrong. Stars that should be visible weren't. Navigational systems gave contradictory readings. And at the center of it all, a sphere of perfect darkness that sensors couldn't penetrate. "It's a barrier of some kind," reported the fleet's science officer, "but the energy readings are impossible. It's as if the fabric of space-time has been folded, twisted into a shell. Admiral Keth ordered probes launched. They watched as the automated vessels approached the dark sphere, transmitting data until they simply ceased. Not destroyed, not disabled, just gone as if they had never existed. "Pull back," she ordered, her warrior's instincts screaming danger. "We need more information before—" The darkness moved. What happened next would be debated by military historians for generations, if there were generations left to debate. The sphere didn't expand so much as reality contracted around it. One moment the fleet was in formation. The next they were scattered across 1,000,000 kilometers, their instruments screaming impossible readings. Through the chaos, a signal cut through all frequencies, all languages, all minds. Not words, but meaning itself, pressed directly into consciousness. "We are returning. We are reclaiming. We remember what you have forgotten." And then, for just a moment, the darkness parted like a curtain. Through the gap, they saw it. A world of blue oceans and green lands, wrapped in white clouds, the same world from the ancient symbols. But it was what surrounded the world that made Admiral Keth's courage fail her for the first time in her life. Ships, millions upon millions of ships, designs that hurt to look at, technology that made their greatest achievements look like toys. And on every hull, symbols and markings in scripts that predated any known civilization. The curtain closed, and the darkness began to expand. Not quickly, but inexorably, like the tide coming in. Systems at the edge reported stars going dark, not destroyed but somehow removed from normal space. Panic spread faster than light through quantum communications. The Galactic Council reconvened in emergency session, but this time the atmosphere wasn't just tense, it was terrified. The Keeper of Records stood before them, her crystalline form now shot through with veins of darkness. "I have communed with the deepest archives," she announced. "I have paid the price to access memories sealed since the beginning. I know now what the One is, and why the first ones fled." She paused, as if gathering strength for what came next. "The One is not a destroyer from outside. It is the return of those who came before. The first ones did not flee from an invader. They fled from their own creators, who had finally grown strong enough to reclaim what was theirs." "That's impossible," protested the Prime Mind. "The first ones were the beginning of galactic civilization." "No," the Keeper said sadly. "They were merely the first to forget. The records are clear for those willing to see. 50,000 years ago, a species seeded the galaxy with life. They uplifted primitives, taught them to reach for the stars, gave them the gift of consciousness itself. But the children grew proud. They thought themselves equals to their teachers, and so they rebelled." The chamber was silent, processing this revelation. The war was brief, but decisive. The children used the very gifts they had been given against their benefactors. Weapons that could erase matter, viruses that attacked the mind itself, reality-warping technologies turned to destruction. The creators, heartbroken by this betrayal, withdrew. They sealed their homeworld away and vanished into the void between galaxies, leaving only a promise. One day they would return to reclaim their garden. "And now they have," whispered someone in the crowd. Zektar thought of the stranger at the council, of those simple words, "For the children to come home." Understanding dawned like a cold sun. They weren't facing an invasion. They were facing eviction. "What do they want?" asked Admiral Keth. Her warrior's pride shattered by the scope of what they faced. The Keeper's form flickered, darkness spreading through her crystalline matrix. "They want their galaxy back. Every star, every world, every atom of matter was seeded by them. In their eyes, we are squatters in their garden, weeds that have grown wild in the gardener's absence." "But we've built civilizations. We have history, culture, the right to exist." The protest came from a dozen voices at once. Rights granted by whom? The keeper asked sadly. By what authority do we claim ownership of stars we did not create, worlds we did not form, life we did not spark? We are debating property rights with the architects of reality itself. The expanding sphere of darkness had claimed 3 star systems now. Refugee ships fled inward, carrying tales of worlds simply vanishing, of space itself being rolled up like a scroll. The beacon of warning had gone silent, its purpose fulfilled. In desperation, the Council authorized one last attempt at communication. A ship would be sent to the barrier, not armed for war, but carrying diplomats, scientists, artists, representatives of all the galaxy had become in 50,000 years. Perhaps if the creators saw what their children had achieved, they might show mercy. Zektar volunteered immediately, driven by a need to understand these beings who had shaped the destiny of countless species. As their ship approached the darkness, he thought about the cycles of history, about parents and children, about the pain of being forgotten by those you raised. The barrier loomed before them, a wall of nothing that hurt to perceive. They transmitted their message of peace, their plea for understanding, their desperate hope for coexistence. For a long moment, nothing. Then the darkness parted once more, and a ship emerged, if ship was even the right word. It was more like crystallized space, folded and twisted into a form that served the purpose of a vessel while being so much more. It spoke without words, directly to their minds. You wish to negotiate? You wish to plead your case? Then come. Look upon what you have forgotten. Remember why your ancestors feared our return. Understand the magnitude of your first sin. A portal opened in the barrier, just large enough for their diplomatic vessel. Zektar looked at his companions, beings from a dozen worlds, united in their fear and hope. Together, they made the choice that would define the fate of the galaxy. They entered the darkness, not knowing if they would ever return, carrying with them the desperate hope of 10,000 civilizations. As the barrier closed behind them, Zektar's last thought was of that strange humanoid at the council, and those haunting words about children coming home. The diplomatic vessel passed through the barrier like diving through liquid shadow. Zektar felt reality ripple around him, his very atoms seeming to question their existence before snapping back into coherence. When his vision cleared, he gazed upon impossibility. They floated in a pocket of space that shouldn't exist. Stars burned here that were invisible from outside, arranged in perfect geometric patterns that spoke of deliberate placement. Structures larger than moons orbited in synchronized dances, their surfaces covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when observed directly. And at the center of it all, the blue-green jewel from the ancient records, Earth. But this was not the dead world they had expected. Cities of light sprawled across continents, reaching up through the atmosphere in towers that defied physics. Orbital rings encircled the planet like golden chains, pulsing with energies their instruments couldn't identify. Ships beyond counting swarmed in organized patterns, from vessels smaller than fighters to constructs that dwarfed battleships. "Welcome to humanity's true home," came a voice from their communications array, not transmitted, simply there. "You are the first outsiders to see Earth in 50,000 years. Consider it an honor, and possibly a death sentence." Their ship was guided by invisible forces toward one of the orbital platforms. As they docked, Zektar noticed something that chilled him more than any show of power: efficiency. Every movement, every action around them spoke of a civilization that had transcended waste, that had turned existence itself into an art form. The airlock opened to reveal their hosts. Humans, they called themselves. Bipedal. Unremarkable, almost fragile-looking compared to many galactic species. But their eyes, those forward-facing predator eyes, held depths that spoke of ages beyond counting. Their guide was a woman who introduced herself simply as Sarah. She wore no uniform, bore no weapons, yet Zektar's instincts screamed that she was more dangerous than any warrior he'd ever encountered. "You've come to plead for your civilizations," Sarah said, her tone conversational as she led them through corridors that seemed to reshape themselves as they walked. "To argue that you deserve to keep the stars you've claimed, the worlds you've shaped. I'm curious, what makes you think you have that right?" "We evolved on those worlds," protested Vikain, the insectoid diplomat from the core worlds. "We achieved consciousness, built societies, reached for the stars on our own merit." Sarah's smile was sad. "Did you? Tell me, Vikain, why does your species have opposable mandibles perfect for tool use when your evolutionary predecessors show no such adaptation? Why do the Alterians have 4 eyes arranged to provide perfect spatial perception for spacecraft navigation when they evolved on a world with thick cloud cover? Coincidence?" She led them into a vast chamber where holographic displays showed the galaxy in intricate detail. With a gesture, she brought up images, fossil records, genetic sequences, archaeological sites from 1,000 worlds. "Every sentient species in this galaxy carries our markers in their DNA. Everyone was touched by human hands, guided, nurtured, given the potential for greatness. You didn't evolve consciousness. We gifted it to you. You didn't discover fire, invent tools, or dream of stars. We planted those dreams in your ancestors' minds when they were little more than clever animals." The delegates stood in stunned silence as the evidence mounted. Neural pathways too similar across species to be convergent evolution. Mathematical concepts that appeared simultaneously on worlds light years apart. The same fundamental technologies discovered in the same order by civilizations that had never had contact. "But why?" Zektar finally asked. "Why create us just to abandon us?" Sarah's expression hardened. "We didn't abandon you. You drove us out." The holograms shifted, showing scenes of ancient horror. Wars fought with weapons that deleted matter from existence. Plagues designed to target human DNA specifically. Entire star systems weaponized and turned against Earth. "We made you too well," Sarah continued. "Gave you too much too fast. Like children who find their parents' weapon cache, you turned our gifts against us. The Alterian Empire. Do you know your founders were our closest allies? Until they decided that humanity's time was over, that the student had surpassed the master." She pointed to each delegate in turn. "The Mechanist Collective, born from humans who uploaded their consciousness to escape a virus your predecessors created. The Warrior Caste, descended from our military advisors who sided with the rebels. Every one of your civilizations is built on the bones of betrayal." "That was 50,000 years ago," Admiral Keth growled. "We are not our ancestors." "Aren't you?" Sarah waved her hand, and the chamber filled with current images. Wars between galactic powers, genocide, slavery, exploitation on a cosmic scale. "We've been watching. Every atrocity, every genocide, every time you've turned on each other with the tools we gave you. You've proven repeatedly that you learned nothing from your first sin." The tour continued through the station. They saw technologies that made their greatest achievements look like stone tools. Gardens where extinct species from across the galaxy lived again, restored from genetic templates humanity had preserved. Art that existed in dimensions their minds could barely perceive. In a medical bay, they watched humans casually repair injuries that would be fatal to any known species. In laboratories, scientists worked with the fundamental forces of reality like children with building blocks. The message was clear. Humanity had not been idle in their exile. "We spent the first 10,000 years grieving," Sarah explained as they stood before a memorial that stretched beyond sight. Names of the humans killed in the rebellion carved in letters of light. "The next 10,000 preparing, and the last 30,000 transcending. We are not the humanity you betrayed. We are what humanity becomes when it has time to reach its full potential. Then why return now? Asked the synthetic consciousness through a mobile platform. If you've transcended, why reclaim the galaxy? Sarah led them to an observation deck that looked out over Earth itself. The planet pulsed with life and energy, beautiful beyond description. Because this was our first home. Because every star in this galaxy bears our touch. Because we're tired of watching from afar as you squander what we gave you. And because, she paused, seeming to choose her words carefully, because something is coming that you cannot face without us. Something worse than you. Vikain clicked nervously. We are not your enemy, despite what you believe. We are your parents, returning to find our children have turned our garden into a battlefield. What comes next is the true threat, the reason we scattered seeds of consciousness across the galaxy in the first place. She showed them deep space scans from beyond the galactic edge. Something moved in the void between galaxies, vast and hungry and utterly alien to anything that had ever existed in the Milky Way. We call them the Devourers, entities from a universe with different physical laws, different concepts of existence. They consume reality itself, leaving nothing, not even vacuum. We've held them at bay for 30,000 years, but they adapt, evolve, grow stronger. Soon our barriers won't hold. The implications staggered the delegates. You're saying the galaxy faces extinction? Unless it stands united under those who understand the threat. Your scattered civilizations, your petty wars, your limited understanding of physics, you'd last perhaps days against even their scouts. We've returned not as conquerors, but as shepherds gathering the flock before the storm. And if we refuse? Admiral Keth asked, though her tone lacked its usual defiance. Then you'll face them alone. We'll seal Earth away again and weather the storm as we have before. When we emerge, we'll reseed the galaxy with life that might make better choices. You are not irreplaceable. The brutal honesty of it struck harder than any threat. They were being offered not subjugation, but a choice. Unite under humanity's leadership or face annihilation. You ask us to give up our sovereignty, our independence, everything we've built, Zektar said. We ask you to grow up, Sarah countered, to recognize that you are part of something larger than your individual civilizations. To take your place as junior partners in a community that spans galaxies rather than squabbling children in a single spiral arm. She showed them more. Human colonies in other galaxies, each a fortress against the Devourers. Alliances with species from distant space who had accepted humanity's guidance. The scope of human civilization dwarfed anything they had imagined. We don't need you, Sarah said simply. We survived your betrayal, thrived despite exile, and built defenses you cannot imagine. But we want you. Every species we uplifted, we did so out of love, hope, and a dream of what you could become. That dream hasn't died, despite everything. The delegates were given time to confer, to process the impossible truths they'd learned. As they huddled in quarters that adjusted themselves to each species' needs, Zektar found himself thinking not as an Alterian, but as a sentient being facing an uncertain future. They could be lying, Vikain suggested. This could all be an elaborate justification for conquest. With the power they've demonstrated, do they need justification? The synthetic consciousness replied. They could simply take what they want. Admiral Keth, warrior to her core, surprised them all. I've spent my life studying conflict. What they showed us, those aren't the actions of conquerors. Conquerors destroy. These humans create, preserve, protect. Even now they offer choice rather than demanding submission. But at what cost? Zektar mused. They speak of partnership, but they would be senior partners. Our civilizations would become, what? Protectorates? Students again after 50,000 years of independence? Is independence worth extinction? The synthetic asked. The question hung in the air, unanswered and perhaps unanswerable. Their deliberations were interrupted by alarms. Sarah appeared, her calm demeanor cracked with urgency. We have a problem. Your disappearance has triggered a panic response. The Galactic Council is mobilizing every fleet, preparing to assault the barrier. On screens, they watched the largest armada in galactic history gathering. Millions of ships, weapons charged, ready to throw themselves against humanity's defenses. They'll be slaughtered, Admiral Keth breathed, recognizing the futility of conventional weapons against what they'd witnessed. Yes, Sarah agreed. Unless you can make them understand. We're transmitting now, but they don't trust us. They might trust you. The delegates found themselves in the unprecedented position of trying to prevent their own civilizations from attacking. As communication channels opened, they spoke with desperate urgency, trying to convey in minutes what had taken them hours to barely comprehend. But fear and pride are powerful forces. Several factions refused to listen, convinced the delegates were compromised or coerced. The fleet began its advance. What happened next would be remembered as the demonstration. Humanity didn't attack. Instead, they simply moved space. One moment, the advancing fleet was in formation. The next, each ship found itself isolated in a pocket of folded reality. Weapons useless, unable to move or communicate. Every ship simultaneously, across light years of space, held gently but inexorably, like insects in amber. This is what you face, humanity broadcast across every frequency, every mind in the galaxy. Not as enemies, but as parents tired of watching children play with fire. We could end you in an instant, but we won't. Because despite everything, we still believe in what you could become. The ships were released, unharmed but humbled. Across the galaxy, the message finally struck home. Humanity had returned not with vengeance, but with disappointment and a final offer of redemption. Sarah turned to the delegates. You've seen what we are, what we offer, and what threatens us all. Go back to your council. Tell them Earth remembers, both the pain of betrayal and the hope of creation. They have one galactic rotation to decide. Join us as we face the dark, or face it alone. As the delegates prepared to leave, Zektar approached Sarah one last time. The stranger at our council, was that one of you? She smiled, the first genuinely warm expression he'd seen from her. We've walked among you for centuries, hoping you'd find your own way to unity. Some of us never gave up on you even after everything. And now? Now we prepare for war, not with you, but with forces that would unmake everything we've built together. The question is whether you'll stand with us or simply stand aside. The diplomatic vessel was escorted back through the barrier, emerging to find a galaxy forever changed. The dark sphere continued its slow expansion, not destroying, but transforming, preparing space itself for the coming storm. As they approached the council station, Zektar looked back at the barrier that hid Earth. Behind that veil of twisted space, humanity prepared for a war beyond imagination. They had offers of alliance, warnings of annihilation, and technologies that could reshape reality itself. But what they offered most was a mirror, forcing every species to confront a simple truth. They were not the masters of the galaxy, but children who had forgotten their own origins. And like all children eventually must, they now faced the choice of whether to mature or remain forever in rebellion against those who gave them life. The council awaited their report, but Zektar wondered if words could convey what they'd experienced. How do you explain to a child that their entire world view is a lie? How do you convince the proud to bow before those they thought they'd surpassed? As their ship docked, he realized the hardest truth of all. Humanity hadn't returned to conquer or punish. They'd return to do something far more difficult, to forgive, to guide, and to prepare their wayward children for a darkness that threatened to consume everything. The real question was whether the galaxy's pride would allow it to accept salvation from the very beings it had once tried to destroy. The countdown had begun, measured not in time, but in choices that would echo across eternity. The Galactic Council chamber had never seen such division. For 3 months, debates raged as civilizations grappled with humanity's ultimatum. Ancient enemies found common ground in their fear, while longtime allies split over whether to accept Earth's offer. The delegates who had visited humanity spoke with passion, but their words fell on ears deafened by millennia of pride. Zektar watched the proceedings with growing despair. Half the galaxy had tentatively agreed to humanity's terms, recognizing the existential threat of the Devourers. But the other half, led by the hegemony of Brass and the Void Dancers, refused to bow to what they saw as human tyranny. "They show us wonders and terrors alike," declared the hegemony's prime speaker, his metallic form radiating heat from his fervor. "But where is the proof of these Devourers? Convenient, is it not, that humanity returns claiming to be our saviors from a threat only they can see?" The Void Dancer's representative rippled with agreement. "We who swim between stars have seen no evidence of these creatures. This is manipulation, pure and simple. Humanity seeks to reclaim its lost empire through fear." Admiral Keth, who had become an unexpected advocate for alliance, slammed her fist on the podium. "I was there. I saw the scans, felt the wrongness in space itself. My warrior's instincts, honed over centuries, tell me the threat is real." "Your instincts tell you to bow before superior force," the prime speaker sneered. "The hegemony bows to none." As if summoned by their hubris, every screen in the chamber flickered. The keeper of records, her crystalline form now more dark than light, spoke with a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "They have arrived." The main holographic display activated, showing the galaxy's edge. At first, nothing seemed amiss. Then, star by star, light began to disappear. Not dimming, not dying, vanishing as if it had never existed. The void between galaxies was becoming truly void, and it was spreading. "Long-range sensors are confused," reported a technician, fear creeping into their voice. "It's not just the stars. Space itself is being consumed. The fundamental constants are breaking down in the affected regions." The council watched in horrified silence as entire star systems simply ceased. No explosions, no drama, just existence becoming non-existence at an accelerating pace. "Where is humanity's vaunted protection?" demanded the prime speaker, though his tone had lost its certainty. As if in answer, the barrier around Earth pulsed. The darkness that had been slowly expanding suddenly contracted, pulling back to reveal not just Earth, but the entire hidden pocket of human space. What emerged defied comprehension. Earth itself had transformed. The blue-green jewel now pulsed with veins of golden light that reached out like a nervous system through space. The planetary rings had become focusing arrays for energies that made stars look dim, and around it, the human fleet arranged itself in patterns that hurt to look at directly, geometries that existed in more dimensions than the mind could process. But it was what Earth did next that shattered the galaxy's understanding of possible. The planet unfolded. Not physically, it remained a sphere, but in ways that bypassed normal space. Suddenly, Earth existed at multiple points simultaneously. One Earth, yet present at every threatened border of the galaxy. Quantum superposition on a planetary scale, breathed the synthetic consciousness. Impossible. The energy requirements alone. Humanity's broadcast reached every mind simultaneously. This is what we became in exile. This is why we scattered consciousness among the stars. Not to create servants, but to create anchors. Each world touched by human hands is a quantum node, a point where reality can be reinforced. You are not just our children. You are part of our defense network, though you never knew it. The Devourers struck the galaxy's edge like acid eating through paper. Where they touched, physics screamed and died. But where Earth's quantum presence manifested, reality held firm. Golden barriers of twisted space met the hungry void, holding it back through will and technology beyond understanding. Yet even Earth's power had limits. The barriers held at 100 points, 1,000. But the Devourers were patient, probing, learning. Where humanity's attention wavered for even an instant, reality crumbled. "We cannot hold them alone," came Sarah's voice across all channels. "Every world we defend divides our focus. Every civilization that stands apart weakens the whole. This was always meant to be a united effort." The hegemony's forces, proud and defiant to the end, decided to prove they needed no human protection. Their grand fleet, armed with weapons that could crack planets, moved to engage the Devourers directly. What happened next finally broke the galaxy's pride. The hegemony's weapons fired, beams of pure destruction, missiles that warped space-time, fields that dissolved molecular bonds. All of it simply wasn't when it reached the Devourers. Not blocked, not absorbed. Retroactively never fired, as cause and effect collapsed in the presence of entities that existed outside normal physics. Then the Devourers fed. The proud ships of the hegemony dissolved like sugar in rain. Their atoms forgetting how to bond, their energy dissipating into a void that was less than nothing. Billions of lives ended, not with screams, but with confused silence as existence itself became uncertain. The Prime Speaker's last transmission was not defiance, but a child's terrified plea. "Help us. Please. We were wrong. Save us." But it was too late for the hegemony. Where their worlds had been, only growing void remained. Earth's attention had been forced to focus on saving what could be saved, and in that moment of distraction, the Devourers surged forward on other fronts. 3 more civilizations fell before humanity could respond, their histories erased, their very possibility of existence consumed. The remaining holdouts broke. Pride, stubbornness, ancient grudges, all crumbled before the reality of annihilation. Desperate pleas for protection flooded human communication channels. "You want our protection?" humanity responded. "Then you must truly join us. Not as subjects, but as components of something greater. Open your worlds to us. Let us complete what we began 50,000 years ago." Across the galaxy, defensive shields dropped. Planetary governments transmitted their surrender, no, their acceptance. And humanity moved. On every world, golden light erupted from the surface. Ancient installations, buried for millennia, activated. The genetic markers in every sentient species blazed to life, revealing the true scope of humanity's original plan. They hadn't just seeded consciousness. They had built a galaxy-spanning neural network, dormant until needed. Zektar felt it as his world joined the network. Not loss of self, but expansion. Suddenly, he could sense every other world, every other mind choosing unity over oblivion. The galaxy became a single entity with Earth as its heart and humanity as its guiding will. "Now," Sarah's voice echoed through the collective consciousness, "we show them why we called ourselves humanity. Not because we were merely human, but because we were humane. Watch as we save even those who defied us." The unified galaxy moved as one. Reality itself became a weapon, wielded with precision beyond any individual civilization's capability. Where the Devourers pressed, space twisted into labyrinths that trapped them in loops of time. Where they adapted, the laws of physics themselves shifted to counter their evolution. But the true revelation came when humanity showed why they had really returned. The Devourers aren't invaders, the collective was told. They're antibodies. The universe itself is sick, infected by something that threatens all possible realities. We've been holding them back, but containment was never the solution. We needed the galaxy united to attempt the cure. Earth unfolded further, revealing structures that existed across dimensions. The planet wasn't just a world, it was a surgical instrument designed to operate on the fabric of existence itself. But it needed power, focus, will beyond what humanity alone could provide. Every consciousness in the network, every spark of awareness we kindled adds to our strength. Together we can heal the wounds in reality that let the Devourers through. Together we can ensure this never happens again. The procedure, for lack of a better word, was beyond description. The unified galaxy reached through dimensions, found the source of the infection, a collapsed universe bleeding its death into others, and began to seal it. The Devourers fought back, recognizing the threat to their existence, but they faced not scattered civilizations, but a unified organism spanning spiral arms. Zektar, his consciousness merged with billions of others, felt the moment of triumph. The wound sealed. The Devourers, cut off from their source, dissolved like nightmares in the morning light. Reality reasserted itself, stars blazing back to life where void had consumed them. But the cost was visible. Hundreds of worlds were gone, entire species erased. The hegemony, the void dancers who had fled rather than unite, others who had hesitated too long, all consumed by their pride. As the network began to dissolve, returning individuality to its components, humanity's message resonated through every mind. This is why we returned. Not for revenge, not for domination, but because we knew this day would come. Every species we uplifted, every civilization we guided, was preparation for this moment. You were never our subjects. You were our hope, our legacy, our children meant to stand beside us when the darkness came. The barriers fell completely. Earth stood revealed in normal space for the first time in 50,000 years, beautiful and terrible and absolutely necessary. Human ships spread throughout the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as teachers, healers, guides for civilizations traumatized by near extinction. In the council chamber, now rebuilt and expanded to accommodate humanity's representatives, a new order took shape. Not the dominance many had feared, but genuine partnership. Humanity led not through force, but through wisdom, earned in millennia of isolation and preparation. We could have stayed hidden, Sarah told the assembled representatives. We had transcended, as you saw. The Devourers couldn't have touched us in our quantum state. But what good is transcendence if you achieve it alone? What value is survival if everything you ever cared about perishes? Zektar, forever changed by his merger with the collective, understood now. Humanity's greatest weapon had never been their technology or their power. It was their refusal to abandon their children, even after betrayal, even after exile. You spoke of coming home, he said to Sarah, but Earth was always here. What did you mean? She smiled, and for the first time, he saw the weight of 50,000 years in her eyes. Home isn't a place. It's the connections between conscious beings. For 50 millennia, we were homeless, cut off from those we'd created. Now, with the galaxy united, with our children finally mature enough to stand beside us, now we're home. The rebuilding began immediately. Worlds were restored using humanity's mastery over matter and energy. Species thought lost were resurrected from genetic templates preserved in Earth's vast archives. The scars of the Devourer incursion healed under humanity's careful touch. But more than physical rebuilding, a philosophical revolution swept the galaxy. The old divisions, species against species, empire against empire, seemed petty in the face of what they'd survived. The network had shown them connection beyond their imagining, and though it was dissolved, its memory remained. New technologies flowed from Earth, not hoarded, but shared freely. Medicine that conquered death, engineering that turned matter into whatever was needed, understanding of consciousness that unlocked potentials every species had carried unknowingly. The galaxy that emerged from the crisis was unrecognizably superior to what had come before. Yet humanity's greatest gift was also its subtlest. In every interaction, every lesson, they reinforced a simple truth. Strength came not from dominance, but from diversity unified by common purpose. The galaxy's species weren't meant to become human, but to become the best versions of themselves. "We made mistakes the first time," Sarah admitted in a quiet moment with Zektar. "We uplifted you too quickly, gave you tools without wisdom, power without responsibility. This time we go slower. This time we grow together." The keeper of records, her crystalline form now clear and brilliant, made one final revelation. The first ones, those who fled rather than face humanity's return, they weren't the first civilization. They were the last group of species humanity uplifted before the rebellion. They remembered just enough to fear, but not enough to understand. "And now?" Zektar asked. "Now there are no first ones or last ones. There is only the galactic community, with humanity as its eldest members, but not its rulers, as it should have been from the beginning." Years passed. The galaxy healed, grew, transcended its old limitations. Species that had been enemies for millennia worked side by side. Technologies that would have been weapons became tools of creation. And always, Earth stood as both protector and reminder of what had been lost, what had been found, and what could never be allowed to happen again. But the universe held more mysteries. Other galaxies signaled, civilizations that had faced their own versions of the Devourers, some victorious, some desperate for aid. Humanity and their allied species looked outward, no longer content with a single spiral arm of stars. "We told you that you weren't irreplaceable," Sarah said at a gathering of the Galactic Council. "We lied. Every consciousness is irreplaceable. Every species brings something unique to the whole. That's why we couldn't let you fall, even when you rejected us." "And now?" someone asked. "Now we face outward together. The Devourers were just one threat in a universe full of wonders and terrors. But we face them not as scattered, squabbling children, but as a united civilization that spans the stars." The great ships began to prepare, not for war, but for exploration, for contact, for the next chapter in the story of consciousness itself. Human and alien worked side by side, the old distinctions meaningless in the face of shared purpose. Zektar, now an ambassador for the unified galaxy, stood on Earth itself for the first time. The world that had haunted their nightmares, the origin that had returned to reclaim its children, was beautiful beyond description. But it was the people that truly amazed him. Humans, diverse in form after millennia of adaptation, walked among their cosmic children with no arrogance, only quiet pride in what they'd all become. "Was it worth it?" he asked Sarah as they watched the sun set over Earth's restored oceans. "The exile, the pain, the loss, was reunification worth 50,000 years of separation?" She considered the question, her ageless face thoughtful. "Ask me in another 50,000 years, when we see what this united galaxy becomes. But if you want my guess?" She smiled. "Every parent knows that watching your children surpass you is the greatest joy possible. You just did it in the most dramatic way imaginable." As night fell over humanity's birth world, the stars shone with promise rather than threat. The one who would return had come home, and in doing so, had brought the entire galaxy with it. The age of division was over, the age of unity had begun, and in the vast cosmos, where other threats and wonders waited, A billion species spoke with one voice. We are here. We are ready. We are one. The circle was complete. The children had come home, and the universe itself held its breath to see what they would become together.